Welcome to Postpartum Unfiltered.
The podcast where we get real about what happens during the postpartum period.
I am Jillian,
And I'm Sarah.
and we are two doctor moms who are not prepared for what postpartum would bring.
By sharing your stories, we hope to spread awareness and allow other families to be more prepared for the time after birth.
Hello, and welcome to Postpartum Unfiltered. Today, our guest is Allie. Hi, Allie. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi. Yes, I'm Allie. I'm a chiropractor and I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I have two boys. One is 5.5 years old, and the other one will be 2 in August.
Oh, wow. Yes. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything about like your birth experience or anything that occurred that you want to kind of discuss with us as it plays into your postpartum?
Sure. I think that's important for both of my experiences. So we'll start with my oldest first. Elon was born in 2018. He's 5.5. So it's important to mention I had a healthy, typical pregnancy, but I spontaneously went into labor at 35 weeks and 0 days. My midwife sent me home, but I ended up going into the hospital and being admitted, and did end up, being admitted my first round, that they were kind of telling me, this is probably not real. These are probably Braxton Hicks, and I had never felt them before. But I did in fact deliver my son that day.
Oh, wow.
So yes, I had him preterm at 35 weeks. And it's important to note that I ended up having an emergency C-section, but they gave me a trial of labor. Like when I showed up, they didn't treat it like an emergency, even though it was pretty early. So that was good for me. I think that was helpful in my journey, that it was an emergency the whole time. And then another important thing to note is that he was in the NICU for about 11 days after that, because that was a kind of a tough and rough start to parenthood and postpartum. And being in the hospital, I only left one time. So I was there for, I think, either 9 or 10 days without leaving once. So that was the beginning of my postpartum ever, was staying in the hospital with about 2 outfits. Well, my son is in an emergency situation. So that is kind of important to mention because of possibilities.
Yeah. So did they want you to stay in the hospital, or did you want to stay because your son was in the NICU?
That was by choice. We didn't have any family or friends nearby who could come to support, or we had dogs at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I did have one person who was able to check on my dogs for me and take care of them. But just logistically, it didn't make sense. We lived 15 minutes away. We didn't want to be gone that long. So it was a choice mostly. And then I only left to do some final preparations because I knew discharge was getting close.
Yeah.
So I left that one night.
And so obviously nobody plans to have an emergency C-section 5 weeks early. So how did that feel for you to be this kind of start into motherhood?
It was definitely tough. Being a chiropractor, I thought I was doing everything right to prevent having a breech baby. I was getting acupuncture and chiropractic for free and regularly, weekly, my entire pregnancy. And you only get about 2 ultrasounds on average for the standard of care in New York, at least. It's probably different depending on what part of the state you live in and which state you live in general. So up to that point, I wasn't even sure that he was breech. So it was a surprise as well. So I wasn't suspecting it, is what I'm saying. I wasn't expecting it, and it was a surprise, and just probably created more trauma. Had I known and had been able to make some additional plans, it would have helped me ease me into it. But I just thought that would never happen to me, of course.
Yeah.
And even during my classes I took, my husband would be like, make sure you pay attention when they would go over the C-section information. And I kind of would be like, no, that's not happening to me. I'm really not, I don't want to learn that much about it. And
yeah,
he had actually warned me. He's like, you might want to listen to it just in case. And I still brushed him off about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's hard to believe it's happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How did you feel being in the hospital for that long?
I was definitely gutted. I was very lonely because, like I said, we didn't have any family nearby. I was in graduate school in New York. My husband and I are both from the state of Ohio. All of our family was back in Ohio. Nobody was like offering to come visit us except for one person. We had one support person who did show up. The weather was pretty bad too, because it was right around Christmas. It was 2 days after Christmas.
Oh, wow.
So it was in Syracuse, New York. So they get snow pretty bad up there. And I remember my mother-in-law did drive through this horrible snow, and I really appreciated it. But a lot of my family members weren't willing to do anything like that. So isolating and just confusing, because you know, I had never had any kind of experience in a hospital other than like little tiny outpatient, surgeries and things like that. I'd never been inpatient for anything before.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like shocking to me. And I wasn't necessarily the primary patient either, because I got discharged. Technically, I was allowed to discharge on like the second day, but I chose to not discharge because of the C-section. They can give you like so many more hours. I only did that so I could continue to get free food and a little bit more care for me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
eventually they just let me become basically like a resident. And I had to discharge early, and I got like no care. Nobody came in and checked on us or anything like that. No food or anything. So that was stressful. And like what I'm trying to say is my son was the only patient in that hospital for the majority of my stay.
Right.
Yeah. And
I think, go ahead.
how did you feel physically after the C-section?
Physically, it was really rough. I was trying to recall that because it feels like a while ago. But I definitely remember, like, as the first time I had to manipulate my bodies in weird ways to still get the same ranges of motion, like to move. I was like, how can I use my arms to turn my entire body? I'd never had to think that way before.
Right.
And I kept doing things wrong accidentally, and I learned from pain, like, ouch, no, I can't do that. And I had to ask for more help from my husband. Like, okay, I really cannot get off the bed unless I get sideways, and then you move my leg, and all these little things. It took me a little while to figure it out, but I did. And the other part is they had me on like Percocets and maybe like ibuprofen. They did that like every 6 hours, I think. And I was like trying to not take Percocets because I had an injury in the past, and it made me really sick to take those. And I remember the nurse said to me, like, honey, you need to take your Percocets if you want to be able to walk down and take care of your child and breastfeed your child.
Oh, wow.
And she just wasn't giving me an option, because I was trying to explain to her, like, oh, I really don't want to take those. I want to try not to. And she just matter of factly said that to me, and it made me kind of feel like a bad mom. That was like one of the first times I was like, oh, like I didn't realize that would be selfish to ask to not to take that.
Yeah.
So it was like, even though it sucks
That's a
for me, I
little rough.
better do it because my kid needs it.
Yeah.
So it was physically not feeling great. I think I did get wheeled in like maybe the first time, but then after that, I did have to walk every time to breastfeed him. And they had me on like 3-hour increments to come in for breastfeeding. Luckily, it was on the same floor. I didn't know that was a lucky thing to say, but since my second experience, I've learned that it could be further away.
Yeah.
So having a C-section, only having to walk down the hallway isn't as bad as I could have had.
Yeah. Like for me, I was really stressed with my first one, so I wasn't able to produce as much as far as breastfeeding. How was your experience with breastfeeding?
So I started by pumping because my son was in the NICU. So I think that was the very first experience. They wouldn't let me, he was NPO, so he wasn't allowed to breastfeed at first. He was just taking the glucose, through the tube. So I can't remember exactly, maybe like the first day he was NPO. And so
What does
that was my
NPO
first
stand for?
experience.
Nothing by mouth.
It's nothing by mouth or
Nothing by
something.
mouth. Okay.
Yeah. I never understood the P part.
It's probably Latin.
Yeah, I never did either.
I meant
It
to
should
ask, but I
actually be like
never did.
nothing. It should be like NBO, I guess.
Mhm.
NBM.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
by mouth.
That's what they say. Yeah. So a lady wheeled in a pump in my postpartum room. I don't even think she really explained to me the flanges, like that there was different sizes.
Yeah.
They might have only given me one size.
They only gave
She
me
just
one
told me how to
size in the
turn it on.
hospital. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was
like
how it
the
worked.
common.
I know she was like, oh, put a sheet on when you do it. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that extra step. Like,
That feels like the least bit of information I need.
I know.
I don't need that's not the help I need.
Right.
But-
Thank you, ma'am.
yeah, but I don't know. Luckily, like the first couple of tries, like I had a little colostrum and I was like, okay, I've been collecting colostrum early anyways. Like I had just started. So I knew what it looked like. And it didn't take long. I think I put the setting up way too high for starting,
Sure.
but I didn't know better. I was just like, oh, that's how I'm getting milk out and I need to get him milk. So
Yeah.
so I might have been like making it more uncomfortable and I didn't have anybody to tell me I didn't have to do that.
Right. Plus those hospital pumps are serious.
Yeah.
They are so strong.
Yeah, it was, I don't know if everybody uses the same ones, but it was one of the Medela ones.
Yeah.
that was the
Yeah.
brand.
I think
Yeah.
it's like the symphony or something. Like it's supposed to be nice, but it's a horrible torture chamber.
Yeah.
It's like the Medela pumps and like that newborn blanket that's like never changed in like,
Yeah, right.
like the two things the hospital has.
Yeah.
All of them standard.
I'm like, we can't change these blankets like at all, these babies.
So when you had your C-section, did you get to do any skin to skin with your son at all, or did they have to take him to the NICU?
No, I didn't even get to see him. I also didn't know his gender. So they did let my husband say like, it's a boy. And then he was in an incubator. I saw him across the room and they showed him to me in an incubator, which I don't think I had glasses on. I don't think I had contacts in. So I was like, what was I looking at from across the room? I did not really see him. My husband actually did catch a picture of it. It's like, you can't even see him in the photo. So like, I definitely wasn't seeing him.
Yeah.
So no skin to skin or anything. I heard some mention of like, they wanted to get him in for an x-ray, his lungs, they were worried about. So that was like why they were rushing him out. But I did ask if I could look at my placenta, or if my husband could take photos of my placenta, and they told him no.
I got photos of, why'd they tell you no?
I'm not exactly sure. I like told my husband and he went over and asked, and then he told me that they said no. So I didn't get the answer to my face.
There were signs all over the hospital room where I gave birth saying no, like pictures or videos of any procedure.
Oh,
so I don't know if they count that.
He like went into the photo. I didn't even know it was a thing. I wanted to see it.
You should have told him to sneak one. What else is he there for?
I know.
Like Dick took it both times. He's like click both times.
Yeah.
I think he was just like so worried about everything else.
Oh, sure.
Like,
it's overwhelming.
Sure.
And it was a miracle that he had his camera, because one of the nurses just randomly asked while they were wheeling me in, like, hey, did you bring any camera or anything? And he's like, oh my gosh, I did. And so she actually let him go back and get it. And then she let him back into the room.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
Nice.
I am really
But then they
glad
said
for
you
that.
can't take pictures of it. So.
Yeah, they let him take pictures of me. And he didn't want to see. It didn't have like the window,
okay.
like tarp thing.
Uh-huh.
I'm not calling that the right thing, but
Yeah.
he didn't want to see any of that. So he didn't take any pictures behind there. I don't think he was pushing his limit with them.
Yeah.
Like he was
Gotcha.
staying out of their way.
Yeah, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So did you feel bonded to your son initially?
I don't remember having any issues. And my husband even came and took some pictures of me when I was in like, I don't know, I felt like they put me back in triage for a little bit. That might not have been what it was called, but that's what it looked like.
Mhm.
After the surgery, I was like eating ice chips and I was really happy. I think I was like relieved. Like I was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like I did this.
Yeah.
And the endorphins were like still there. So it hadn't like, I didn't even know what a NICU was. I don't think I'd ever heard that word probably, honestly,
Yeah.
at that point. So, you know, in my head, they were just doing a couple of checks and I was going to see him soon, like whatever, no big deal.
Mhm.
So I was okay. And then when they finally did wheel me in to see him, I think he was already extubated. And so he wasn't like, he looked pretty normal. Like everything looked okay. He was moving around normally. So I didn't get like scared or anything. And so bonding went well. I was able to hold him. That first time I think I went in there, I think they did let me hold him with all the wires and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. The day I left the hospital, I remember that's when my anxiety got really high. So the day that he was released from NICU, how did you feel? That he was going to come home with you?
Yeah. Oh, it was horrible because it was horrible. So there was like 2 neonatologists who were rotating on the schedule. And because of the holiday, because it was like Christmas and New Year's,
Mhm.
Their rotation was different. It wasn't like a set routine like it usually was. It made it a little bit less predictable. And so there was one I liked and one I didn't like.
Oh,
You know
no.
what I mean? So I
Yeah,
was like dying
no.
for the doctor I liked because I knew he would discharge me sooner. And he gave me all these hopes for discharge, I don't know, around day 9, I think. And then he ended up telling, or I had the other doctor that day. They switched that day that I thought I was going home and I
Oh,
didn't get
no.
discharged. And I cried and that was really hard. So
Yeah.
that gave me anxiety. I was like, okay, now I know when they say it, it doesn't mean it's happening. Don't get your
Right.
hopes up. I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the doctor I liked came back on the schedule. I think I went home that first day and I liked him a lot because he was like, I argued with them the night before I left. I was like, I need to be with my baby. And he agreed with me. He's like, we need to get that mom with the baby. I was like, why are we not in a room together? Now our hospital didn't offer that. Like,
Mhm.
they don't have rooms for the NICU parents. They probably do now, but not at the time. But I was like, put him in the postpartum wing with me. Like,
Yeah.
he was already an open air incubator. So I was like, tell me a reason why he can't be in a postpartum room. They could still monitor him. So
Yeah.
I had to argue and they had to like have some nurses agree to like do extra checks with him in the postpartum wing. Anyways, but the doctor was willing to work with me. The
Yeah.
other one was not. So, but the point was, yeah, I definitely had anxiety going home. I was like, is this really going to happen? Because all night they were like, if you reach this goal by tomorrow, you can go home. So
Yeah.
every feed, he was not gaining weight fast enough. They like lose their 10% or something of their body weight
Yeah.
within so many days and they have to get it back. You know what I'm talking
Mhm.
about?
Yeah. Yeah.
He had a very strict goal of weight gain that he had to reach. And so every time I fed him, the nurse had to weigh him and then report back. And I remember one of the feeds, they're supposed to take his diaper off. She
Mhm.
left his diaper on because she felt bad for me. She wanted us to go home. And
Oh,
because it
wow.
had pee in it and it was a little extra
It's
weight.
heavy. Yeah.
And I was like on the line. And so, yeah, that was a lot of anxiety because all night, every single feed, I was like, okay, we're going to be in here. I didn't know how long. Now I know that most of the time you automatically get 2 days if something doesn't meet their number that they want you to reach.
Mhm.
It's usually an automatic 48 hours they add on to you.
Oh,
But I didn't
wow.
know that back then.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that either.
That might be a hospital policy
Yeah. I'm
wherever
sure.
you're
I'm
located,
sure
different hospitals.
their policies are a little bit more strict. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was it
And
like when you?
I also wanted to mention before I left for discharge, I had a couple bad experiences with some of the NICU nurses.
Oh, no.
And we went to rounds regularly to get updates and ask questions and stuff.
Yeah.
And I had to request one of the nurses not care for my child anymore
What
because
happened?
she actually barged into my postpartum room. We like slept through our alarm, and I don't even think she tried to call our room phone, but she barged in and she said, "You need to get up right now and feed your baby, or he's gonna starve." Basically, is what she said to me.
Oh,
And I started
gosh.
crying. My husband, I don't know if he cried, but he was very upset.
Yeah.
It's not what you say
And
to your mom.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? And I'm so out of it because I accidentally slept through because I wasn't
Exhausted.
really sleeping and I had been awake that whole time, you know, we're all
Yeah.
exhausted.
Hey,
Like she could have had one of the postpartum nurses gently come in and wake me up. She actually barged in down the hall just to yell at me.
Oh,
And that was just
lovely.
one of the things she did. She made many nasty comments about breastfeeding, and I overheard her when they would code. I forget the colors or whatever. I would hear her come in from a code complaining like, "Oh, they got their feces on me," but she would say the swear word like, "Oh,
Oh,
that's so disgusting. They got blah on me." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like,
Code Brown, I think it is. Yeah.
yeah.
I was like, just like
She's
I
not
can't
supposed.
have her by me.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
you
too
need to
much
get rid of
negative
that. That's
energy.
totally not okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so we tattled on her at rounds, and the horrible thing is the NICU room was so small. Like she would be taking care of the babies right next to ours, like mean mugging us, you know, looking us
Right.
down. I'm like, okay, she's not taking care of my son at least, but
Oh my
so
God.
that was
Yeah.
another horrible
So
thing.
do you feel like that played into your anxiety or any other mood symptoms you were having?
Yeah, anxiety for sure. I was I had to be strong though because my husband was more emotional than I'd ever seen him probably in his whole life. And
Mhm.
so I played a little bit more of like, I don't know, like a stronger personality at that time. I wasn't letting myself feel too many emotions because I just had to be strong. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
So I don't remember being super anxious. I'm sure I was, but without recognizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember, like, I was sad, but I wouldn't let myself. I was just trying to like keep everybody together.
Yeah. So when you were home, did you feel anxiety with him once he got home with you?
No, the only thing I was a little bit anxious about was, is he going to start losing weight again? Like, how do I know? Like, I don't have anybody to measure him every time I feed.
Right.
Mhm.
And they wanted me to add formula to each feed because they're always like, oh, you don't have that special scale that shows you how much breast milk your baby's getting. So we don't really know how much he's getting. Even though I was pumping so much, I was oversupplying. Like I had that freezer full.
Mhm.
And so I was like, can we just safely assume like if he's been on there for 15 to 20 minutes, he's like getting a good amount. But
Mhm.
they didn't even have the scale that like went to the correct increment to like be official. They were like, oh yeah, we don't have one of those, so we can't go on that. I'm like,
Okay. That's
okay.
helpful. Thank you.
So here I'm at home now and and I'm like, oh no, I don't have anybody to double check that he's getting enough food. So I think for like the first 2 or 3 days, we added formula. Like I would give him a formula bottle after breastfeeding.
Mhm.
And then right away, I was like, this is not right. I'm like, I don't want to do this. Why am I doing this? Just because they said so? I'm like,
Yeah.
forget this. And then like I had a timer set for every 3 hours. And I was like, no, I'm not
Yeah.
doing that. So
Yeah.
it took a while. I think the timer thing I did for longer, but it took a while and I realized I'm not going to do this anymore. Like just because they said it didn't feel right.
Mhm.
So my instincts kind of took over. And yeah, I don't remember feeling anxiety until I had to start thinking about going back to school.
And how long
And
after birth was that?
well, the unfortunate thing is actually one of the doctors at the school was like having people message me on Facebook while I was still in the NICU in the hospital.
For
So I
what?
forgot about that until just
Saying
now.
what? Yeah, I was like saying what?
Because I hadn't finished my notes because I actually left
Should be saying
school.
congratulations. Hopefully everything.
I went into labor while I was like adjusting a patient, like
Oh,
in
wow.
school. Like I was actually trying to like stack up hours for my maternity leave. I'm calling
Yeah.
it a leave.
Right, right.
So I was working over Christmas break, which was, I didn't have to do that. I signed up to do that. I volunteered, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I didn't think it would be a big deal, but yeah, one of the doctors was like, she needs to come in and finish her notes. I'm like, really? I think that it's okay. I think they can wait.
Yeah. Excuse me, sir.
No, so I ignored him, but then two of the girls were really sweet and they helped me out. I won't say anybody's name, but they may have gotten my password and they might have went in and finished some of my notes with some help so that they could get him off my back. And that was
Yeah.
incredibly sweet of them
That's
because
crazy.
I wasn't in the mind or the headspace and I wasn't even healed enough that
Yeah.
I should be going in and
Right.
doing things like that.
not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I forgot about that, but that actually started while I was still in the hospital. So some of that anxiety was there pretty early.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then how much time did you have after getting home before you had to go back to school?
The only good thing is that I was still on that break in between semesters or trimesters. So I think I got exactly 4 weeks until the next trimester started, about 4 weeks. And then I was like, I want 6 because I had a C-section. So I was like arguing with like the person in charge of that I wanted 2 more weeks. And she was trying to tell me I couldn't, I would like fail the whole trimester if I missed 2 weeks because I need my hours. All the hours count. So anyhow, I was like, I don't care. I'm taking 5 weeks no matter what. And then she talked me into coming back that next week. So I got 5 weeks. And then I told her, all right, for my first, I think it was my first week, I told her I wouldn't do anything physical, no adjusting. Like I'll sit there if you want me to sit there. I don't know what I'm going to do for you. And so that's what we agreed. And she didn't tell any of the staff or any of the doctors. So that all the doctors are constantly prodding me and poking me to like go adjust people. And I'm like, I'm not, I just had a C-section. I'm not doing anything physical. That was the agreement. And they're like, what? We don't know. And so that was stressful.
How can they expect that? That's nuts.
Yeah,
Because that person in charge is a joke. I hope she doesn't work there anymore. I'm sorry to say.
It's sad. It's a she, right? Like she should, I don't know.
Yeah, right. And
Not,
she
but
would
like,
talk about her own kids. And I was just like, I don't know about you.
supposed to
do
be
not know.
supportive, like, and
Right.
understanding. It's crazy to me.
It's yeah, and I'm just still so frustrated that we don't treat C-sections like major surgery.
Right.
Like it's probably one of the most major of the common surgeries.
Yeah. I don't, yeah, I'm surprised. Like most people didn't even know unless I told them, and it didn't get brought up, I guess, unless it had to.
Yeah.
Oh,
So how
Like one of
was
the
it?
doctors was like, "Oh, can you just adjust necks? Like you can sit down and do a cervical adjustment." I'm like, "No, I'm not doing anything." I was
Well,
so
good for
frustrated.
you. Good for
I was
you.
like,
I'm
"Really?"
Up for
so
yourself,
proud of
yeah.
you for standing up for yourself because
Mhm.
that's a lot of
Thank you.
pressure and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So how was it after like adjusting to kind of going back before you wanted to and then all that stuff and having,
Yeah. I
the
probably
home and the dogs and school and a husband and a new baby.
mhm. I think I'd probably that's when I started to have depression that I'd recognized, especially
Mhm.
with pumping. Pumping was a whole argument, getting the pumping room set up appropriately.
Yeah.
That was a whole thing. And me and another girl had a baby. She had a baby 10 days after me. She did
Yeah.
not have a C-section. She went back a week before me.
Uh-huh.
She was more willing to play their game. I was less willing.
Yeah.
I think I was the one who argued for everything that we got. I don't think she had to argue about the labor or the nursing rooms. I'm sorry. That's what I meant, the pumping rooms.
Yeah.
I'm just saying she was just like willing to just do whatever they said, and I was not. So that
Yeah.
was hard too because I'm like, oh, you should be my like partner in
Yeah.
this, like
Yeah.
helping me. But she just like she wasn't mad, and then I'm like, maybe I'm depressed. I'm like having anxiety because she's not acting like me.
Yeah.
Like we feel differently about this situation.
Yeah.
So like yeah, pumping was like one of the most depressing moments for me because I couldn't wait to get away from this one specific doctor who had, harassed me about the notes. I could not
Yeah.
stand that doctor. I would try to hide from him. And I was like, okay, I can finally breathe. But he would like, it's like he knew. Like sometimes I wouldn't get to pump on schedule because I would get harassed. Like, no, you need to adjust this patient. And I'm like, but I
Yeah.
really need to pump. And
Yeah.
then that person would act supportive, but they were not supportive. They were making like snide remarks about like, oh, back in the day, my wife, she didn't even have a pump.
Oh God.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Well, great. You're 100
how is
years
this
old,
Love
relevant?
but
it. I
don't worry
love
about it.
those love. I said it in like one of the episodes. I was like, one of these when I told them, oh, I have like postpartum anxiety, and someone's like, oh, never heard of that. It's not even a real
Oh
thing. I'm
wow.
like, what? Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is.
Mm,
And it was women telling me. It wasn't even like their husbands. And it's like older. It's crazy to me. Like
mm.
that's common
Yeah.
shit to be
That
said.
reminds me, my grandma, I mentioned something about postpartum, and I wasn't even talking about postpartum depression. I was just using the term. And she was,
Yeah.
oh, you don't have that. Like
Oh,
to
okay.
her, postpartum just meant postpartum depression.
Mm.
And like she literally just interrupted what I was saying and was like, you don't have that. I'm like, okay,
Okay.
well, first of all, that's not what that word means.
Yeah.
Like, okay, and second of all, I'm like, really?
Yeah. Second of all, postpartum's
Come on.
forever. I've had my children and now I am changed. So, like,
But she literally didn't know. She just thought that meant like if you had depression, like postpartum, they go together. I'm like,
oh
wow.
my God.
My mom. She didn't talk.
We're in trouble. So when you started
Mhm.
to recognize kind of switching from this anxiety to depression, how did you deal with that?
I don't think I did. I just was so worried about finishing school
Yeah.
that I always used to say that in chiropractic school, I didn't have time to be depressed because I was so busy. I used
Yeah.
to say that before I had my son.
Yeah.
And so I think that like went into full gear once I had a kid and chiropractic school. I
Yeah.
was just like, what's my next goal? What's my next goal? Finish this trimester, get this assignment done, get home and feed my baby, get home before the babysitter needs to go. Like,
Yeah.
I just had something. Yeah. I don't think I realized I was depressed until probably after I graduated chiropractic school.
Right, like a chance to sit down and process it.
Right. Yeah.
And how long after he was born did you graduate?
Um, I should have prepared for this. I had to think about the math. It was a couple months. It was 2 trimesters. So what's the trimester was like 8 weeks still?
15.
I don't remember. 50. Oh my gosh. I'm like, what am I? I'm like, okay. So it was about when he was 8 months at my graduation, I
Okay.
think. I think he was 8 months old at my graduation. That helps me put it in perspective.
Yeah.
So yes, I had about the whole clinical. So maybe it was 3. I had all my clinicals left.
Yeah. Okay. So almost a year. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, almost a year. Look at that. See, my brain just
Yeah.
like
Yeah, just
don't
block
even
it
know.
out because you don't need that. You didn't have it, so don't worry about it.
And I didn't get any kind of treatment or anything. I
No.
think the biggest thing maybe was I don't even think I like went into exercising or anything. I went into opening a small business, just another distraction.
Thank you for listening to Postpartum Unfiltered.
If you enjoyed the show, please like, share, comment, or leave a review.
You can follow us on Instagram at postpartum.unfiltered.
If you feel called to share your postpartum experience, please contact us on Instagram or at drjilliancampbell.com.